Hello. We're doing things a little different today. First of all, my eyes hurt, so I need to wear my glasses. Second of all, I have literally, okay, this video is about making love and its relation with film. I don't know why I wanted to, well, I know why I wanted to do this video and I'll mention it later on, but is there really a set basis? And no, there isn't. Did I do a lot of research? I did not, because it only took me like 2 hours to research this stuff, so I don't think it's in depth. So I'm sorry if you're not happy with it. I do deeply apologize. But first of all, I do want to start off by saying here are the extent of my notes. Oh my god, it's so bright. And wait, I can't hold it. And that. So it is a lot, and I'm going to read off of a teleprompter because I think that'll be easier for me. Also, I do want to talk about, because I always talk about my books on here, I got 2 new books. I got Love, A History in 5 Fantasies. I've been wanting this book for so long. And then I got The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedman. And have I finished Sapiens? No, I haven't. I need to. I've been too busy. But I'm almost done with it. And have I finished Hermetica? No. But when I read all these books, I'm sure I'll probably find something to talk about in these videos. So just pray with me. Anyways, let's get on with the video. I'm not editing this, so I deeply apologize for anyone who is not happy about that. So we're going to start off with the very first moving picture in history, which was publicized and created in 1878, and it is The Horse in Motion. It's very iconic. I mean, if you watch Jordan Peele's Nope, you've seen it. It's kind of like what the whole movie is not centered about, but it is a very critical point, or point in the movie. And it is a moving picture of a jockey riding a horse. Now, we go even a little further to the first, I'm going to say corn. Okay, first of all, I'm going to say corn, and then I'm going to say making love, because I don't want to be demonetized. But I think I will be demonetized anyway, because I'm going to go very in-depth. But the first corn, daguerreotype, which is a type of photo process that was taken in the early 1800s. The first corn one was taken in 1850, and soon after, the Lumiere brothers created the moving picture, and therefore, the first corn film was created by the pioneers of corn, Eugene Perot, and Albert Kirchner. Kirchner created the first corn for Perot. Okay, and he did this in an 1896 film called, I don't know how to speak French, La Voiture de la Marie, which showed a woman named Louise Willy. And if you look up on Wikipedia, I got most of this information on Wikipedia and other sources. If you look up on Wikipedia, there's nothing about her, so she's not like a famous person, but her name was Louise Willy, and she performed a dance, not appropriate dance, a little tease dance, if you know what I'm talking about, because I don't know what I can say in here and what I can't. And these were all, like, films like this were created in a much more personal collections. They wasn't very publicized, but the first thing that was considered a making love scene was in the 1896 12 to 18 second moving picture called The Kiss, which caused so much controversy among moviegoers, and it was literally just 2 people sharing a short peck for 18 to 12 seconds, which nowadays you're just like, okay, you see that in the middle of the street. But it's, interestingly enough, this was one of the first ever films shown commercially to the public. So imagine, put yourself, you live in 1896, in a couple years, almost the 1900s, and you go see this moving picture, The Kiss. You know, you're like, wow, I really want to see what's up with all these moving pictures and what's going on. And it's two people kissing for 18 to 12 seconds, and you are completely distraught. It's the most disgusting thing you've ever seen in your life, because guess what? It was very taboo to be kissing in public at that time. I'm not to the point where it says that on my teleprompter yet, but anyways, also because this was the first commercially, one of the first ever films that was commercially open to the public. This early on in the film industry, film censorship was like already happening, because people were so like almost distraught and disgusted at what they saw. It caused like a lot of public outcry. And if you think about it, in the 1800s, making love was kind of viewed as a spiritual bond and a form of procreation. And it was only a form of procreation between a man and his wife. Obviously, women were expected to be on their wedding days. That it really is like, I think this is probably the prime time when like making love was viewed like really just like only between a man and his wife, like no affairs, like all of that. Obviously that was still happening, and that happened way before then, and it happened way after, and it happened in that time, but it was taboo. And making love without the intent to procreate was sinful, and contraception was taboo. So you can imagine the times and seeing that film going on. Also, kissing could lead to public prosecution, and that's a little crazy. And then, okay, Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, we all know him, we all learned about him in school. Thomas Edison had his own fund and used similar methods to make his own moving picture of, bet you didn't learn this in school, of a not fully clothed woman getting up from her bathtub and running away. So he had his own little shot at this scheme going on. So look, maybe some people do share some similarities to Thomas Edison. Anyways, moving forward. Although the 1840s and 90s were a period like of time that most commonly referred to as the naughty 90s, like although there was so much like taboo about making love and all of that, art and having like pictures of promiscuous acts was still very much like not allowed, but people did it. Like people didn't make clear, no one's gonna follow the rules. I'm sorry, but no one's gonna follow the rules. People want to be happy, you know? So obviously, although it was taboo, people were still doing it. And if we move forward to the 1920s, Hollywood, I would say one of the best times to be alive. Probably actually not one of the best times to be alive after I go on with this list. The 1920s Hollywood was very crazy. I said it very liberal, but because, okay, you're going to see with these scandals, like, okay, first of all, mature films in the 1920s were being made, and that dealt with a lot of adult content, whether it be like promiscuous things, or most importantly, it showed women in power. And this was not good for a lot of people. Not a lot of people like this. Media coverage at the time was also insane. Stories and scandals were flying around. I mean, you have like the very iconic, not iconic actually, oh my god, I can't believe I said iconic, but the very infamous Fatty Arbuckle scandal and all of that happened. I mean, like, it was just, there was so many things flying in the media, because 1920s Hollywood was peak, and it was just like, boss in your face. But gossip ran rampant everywhere, which caused widespread condemnation. Condemnation? I don't know what the word I wrote was, by many different groups. So a lot of people were not okay with this. I'm sorry, that was a loud notification. Not a lot of people were okay with all this that was going on, especially religious groups. And then after the stock market crash of 1929, there was a big blimp in the film industry due to the taste of the jazz age and economic realities of the Depression. So filmmakers didn't really know whether they should make films that they were making before that were very vibrant and like in your face, or they should make very sad films about the economic, like, what was I gonna say? The economic way of the world that was happening. So Hollywood at this point was putting out very salacious films because that's just what they were doing. There was violence, making love, drinking, everything immoral about society was technically put into these films. And I don't remember if I read it or I'm just making this up, but I do believe they did this because of the Depression and because not a lot of people had a lot of money. I'm probably totally pulling this out of my butt cheeks, but because of this, I do feel like they probably showed films with all of this because people weren't probably going out at the time, and to waste your money on a film was just a little too much. So they really had to probably like clickbait some people, basically what I'm trying to say. So after all of this is when the Hays Code was introduced, which was for Hollywood, which was like a way for Hollywood to set up censorships for themselves without having like the government to step in, because they were acting like so immoral and they were showing all these like very salacious things. They created the Hays Code in order to like not let the government interfere, because if the government interfered, things could have been like worse and it could have probably extended for a longer period of time. Although a lot of filmmakers like don't really like the Hays Code and think it like crushed a lot of creativity for people. It was honestly better in the end, because if you had the government step in at the time, we probably would still have the Hays Code. You know what I mean? Like, it probably would have lasted longer, probably, you know, all of that. So it was a way for like not to let the government interfere. And a lot of people, I think Tarantino does mention that he's not a big fan of Albert Hitchcock. Well, he's a big fan, but he's not like all up about him because of the Hays Code, because he felt like the Hays Code limited Alfred Hitchcock so much. So I guess that could tell you, like, I guess the point of time that you were living in. And the Hays Code called for the promotion of traditional values and a really sort of ban on violence, making love, and liberation for the most part, especially for women. As I mentioned, these movies were they weren't a lot about women like liberating themselves, but they were showing women in power, and the Hays Code kind of put this away. Excuse me. And then also a side note, in my opinion, I think the Hays Code was good and bad because it did restrict people, but the article I got this from, I'm so sorry because I don't remember the article I got this from, mentions that, and I totally 100% agree, and I've said this in so many videos, I think restrictions make people more creative, and it like pushes them to think outside the box, and a lot of people did that because they found ways to kind of convey their message without conveying it. You know what I mean? And I think that's pretty cool. The Hays Code ended in 1968. Can't read. But I want to jump back to the 50s though, because I saw in a Mina Lee video, I don't know, I'm sorry. I'm really bad with names. But she says, movies in the 50s were competing with a lot of home-based activities like television and reading and homebred sports. And one of the things that Hollywood did to set movies apart was to experiment with more provocative material. This sentence was literally the only reason I wanted to make this video, because I was so interested in Hollywood and its correlation to like provocative and like provocative material, because there's always huge discussions about it, which I'm going to mention later. But anyways, in 1969, famous artist Andy Warhol created the film Blue Movie, which is what is now deemed as the golden age for corn. Now you're probably like, why did I mention this? Why am I mentioning corn? I did mention Warhol because I do believe film is art, and he is an artist, and a very celebrated one at that. And although this is in Hollywood, I do think this film changed the game for a lot of people. Then we're going to jump to the 70s, which is the year right after that film came out. And they were a much more liberating time for relationships and making love. People were open and making love was talked about and so on. You know, all of that gist. During this time, a majority of couples made love before marriage, which was really frowned upon before then. And it's a very loud statement as to where they were as a society at the time, in my opinion. This is also where times were really changing before we get to the raunchiness of the 80s, because the 70s, look, this is how I think about it. The 60s were kind of like a period of like a warm-up for raunchiness and salaciousness. The 50s and 60s were like a little warm-up, okay? Then the 70s, it was like really getting out there. 80s, it was full blast out there. Hopefully I'm not screaming into my mic, but anyways. In the 70s, you saw many famous directors that growing up, I think a lot of people deem the 70s as a really golden age for film, because you had Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, Stanley Kubrick, and Robert Altman, and like so on. Like you had so many directors growing up in the 70s, and some of them released some of their like most famous films in the 70s. Martin Scorsese released like Taxi Driver and Boxcar Bertha. And I do want to mention, I know a lot of, well, they're not useless facts. I don't think they're useless because they come in handy right now. I watched like a 4-hour documentary that was split into 2 parts about Martin Scorsese. And if I remember correctly, because I watched it a couple years ago, some of Martin Scorsese's first films were that of almost pornography films, because he had already made films in the past. He was making some documentaries, I believe, and he really wanted to experiment with what he was doing, and he wasn't being given the creative freedom that he wanted. But there was some executives with that industry who really loved what he was doing and wanted to support him. So they gave him the funds, and I'm pretty sure they gave him creative freedom for his movies. But they, told him you have to include a scene or two, maybe a little, some of that, all of that, And I'm pretty sure Boxcar Bertha is one of those films that is under those creative freedom and all of that things that he was going through. And then, most famously, you have Stanley Kubrick with his Clockwork Orange, which released in 1971. Which, if you have never watched the movie, it has many phallic props, images, and instances all over the film. The film, it's a beautiful film, but it's very in your face. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. It's very in your face. And then again, I said, really, if you've ever seen any film in the 70s, it was not a time to be shy about making love. Then let's move on to the 80s. I could talk about the 80s forever because, okay, first of all, let's just talk about Crimes of Passion. I do not believe Crimes of Passion. Okay, let's look it up right now. Crimes of Passion. It was released in the 80s. That movie in of itself, if you've ever watched that movie, that's the 80s, in my opinion. That's how I view the 80s outside of, like, I don't know, okay, there's a lot going on in the 80s. A lot going on in the 80s because the 80s is a very nostalgic age for a lot of people, and I mentioned this later on. But it's also an age where if you look at nightlife, you see Crimes of Passion. That's what I didn't live in the 80s, so maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I think the 80s is, so that's why I'm saying it's so raunchy. But anyways, the 80s were some of the raunchiest decades for making love and film. It was everywhere and everything all at once. Then again, look at Crimes of Passion. I think that tells you enough. Excuse me. The one main thing that I learned when I was doing my research was that um, it was more on the younger side. These not corn, but like films that had making love in them, because 80s was also a big decade for films. But these films, you kind of understand because these films were geared towards teens and like younger adults. They weren't like completely raunchy, but it was like a little like, hey, like it was a little hint, you know. And even if there was a raunchy film, that's not alright. But it when you really think about it, it's not geared towards adults. There are more young adult films that have these scenes. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. But I just don't want to touch on that. I don't want to touch on that. Thank you. But I do think for the most part that this is because the 80s was a decade that was all about being a young adult. I mean, so many people were growing up during this time, and being a teenager was all over the media. Literally, look at Stranger Things. Like, I'm sorry, but when you think about the 80s, all you think about is growing up. Like, being an adult in the 80s is like, it's not talked about as much. I think the one thing people remember about the 80s is just growing up, all the toys and all the shows that you used to watch. You know, does that make sense? I don't know. And it's just, it's more mainstream, the nostalgia of the 80s. But when it comes to the 90s and 2000s, I do believe there's still sort of love depicted in films, except it's much more tamer than before, especially the 70s. The 70s are crazy, in my opinion. And the way I could best describe this to you is you could see something, but not everything. And I do believe that we have progressed. Things, yes, have gotten raunchy, but they also got less raunchy now. And I think it's because many mainstream shows have depictions of raunchiness and like love. And yes, they're talked about everywhere, but in film, I think it is much less seen. It's more in the television side that this raunchiness is. And film in general has geared away from this love that we used to see so many, like in the 70s. And for the most part, I believe that this is because of the audience that encompasses films. In the 30s and 40s, in the 30s and 40s, having anything racy in a film is just horrendous, considering that the cinemas was like a principal form of entertainment for people. Like, people would go with their families, and I think the same goes for now. Obviously, we don't go to the theaters as much, but people watch films in that same way of entertainment. It's not necessarily an art form. And usually you know when you're seeing a more artistic movie because there is sort of that love in that. Does that make sense? I think that makes sense to me, because whenever I see a movie that I know is not that mainstream, there's always a scene, or there's something that hints to a scene. But when I go see a movie that's mainstream, it's very calm and it's very not like that. I'm not saying that's bad, but I do believe it's because it's more of a leisure activity, so people don't expect anything racy. Because if they want something racy, they could just go to Google or Safari. Yep, I said that. I think that's a big change too. I think that's why we don't see that anymore. Anyways, that's enough of me. And then that brings me back to the 70s and 80s once again, where I think film was much more independent in structure. VHS was happening and things were changing and people were more enthralled with the world of film, in my opinion. I mean, I think the 70s to like the early 2000s, where I think were like a really good time for film. And I think after that we kind of just like died down, not necessarily, but things became more for blockbuster effect. And I think that's where everything died down. But then this is also the debate for the 80s, considering making love was everywhere. Then again, I mentioned Crimes of Passion. That's just how I imagine the 80s. If I imagine the 80s as Crimes of Passion and Stranger Things, like, combined, and Gremlins, that's all in. And Back to the Future. I know everything. Anyways, and Ghostbusters. I'm sorry, I used to watch a lot of 80s movies. That's what I grew up on. So what I'm trying to say is, I don't think there is a pattern, or at least maybe there is for more independent films. And then I think that brings me to the question that originally so many people asked in discussion, and I think it's a huge discussion when you watch a film in general, and it's that of, is it necessary to have making love scenes in a film? Because for many people, it is a source of like, I don't want to see that if I'm watching a movie with my family, but then people are also like, it adds to the art form, and it does give, if it adds to the movie, it adds to the movie, you can't escape that. And that's just the creative decision that the director made. And I see both sides of the story, but I'm also a person who watches movie alone, so I really don't care what you put, because whatever you do is perfect. And I think that it is necessary for these films. Not necessary to have these films, but for an independent filmmaker, maybe it is that riskiness that will make people see their movie. Or it is the fact that it is crucial to their film and they don't have a big company telling them what not to do and what to do. They're not being bossed around, in my opinion. But I think it really is up to the creator. Also, I want to give a shout out to one of the most famous and most popular making love sequences in film history, and that is from Don't Look Now by Nicholas Roeg, because literally everyone references it in all their movies. If you watch that movie, people mention it, or like not mention it, but they pay homage to it so many times, even if it's like an angry scene or like anything. Like people pay homage to that sequence everywhere because it's a very intimate moment and he made it so beautifully. But that's all I wanted to say. So yes, that's all. I kind of spoke really fast, I think. Hopefully I'm not editing this, so hopefully you guys enjoy the video. I'm not sure what I want to make my next video on. I really want to do it on the dying art of the music video, because today I have watched at least 3 hours worth of music videos, and God, I miss them so much. I also watched Charlie XCX's 360 music video. I loved it. When Chloe Sevigny popped up, I literally started crying. I have a photo of her on my wall, right there. I love her. But yes, and hopefully I'll read these books and come up with more ideas. And I don't know. Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you liked it. I think I talked a little fast. I don't even know if I made any points. But yes, I really wanted to research this topic. And yeah, that's all. So thank you. Thank you for watching. Have a beautiful day. Sweet dreams. Bye.